All right, we are back on the trail for late November. It's quite warm. Got my zipper open and everything. Very nice, and the wind is picking up. You can maybe see in the distance the treetops are swinging ever so slightly. So this means that we might be greeted with the sound called PSITHURISM once we step in there. PSITHURISM, an exquisite word in the English language for the sound of leaves in the wind, human activity. You know, I jinxed it in my last video. I said nobody's ever on this trail, and today it's a second set of dog walkers. Oh well, I think they're heading off though, so it's all good. So, today I felt like I have to get out of the house again. I have to get out from between the four walls and maybe think of, I think it's a Nietzsche quote. Nietzsche said that you can't trust any thoughts that you have indoors. If the devil's gonna find you anywhere, it's probably gonna be indoors. He could be here too, but he's gonna have a harder time. He's gonna have a harder time bamboozling you. Nietzsche, of course, was a what's the word? Prophilic, experienced hiker. You know, he would walk in the mountains for hours and hours each day, and I'm beginning to see what he meant by his utterance. Anyway, it did get me thinking though about stories of solitary confinement. What do I mean? Like, I've always liked stories of solitary confinement. I seem to prefer the ones from the real world, but I don't mind like a good fictional account. Speaking of things like, you know, men getting stuck on desert islands, men being sent to prison, quite often unjustly for crimes they didn't commit, and having to sit in a cell, 4x4 cell, for decades sometimes. And stories of this kind of nature. So just to give you an idea, some of the ones that come to mind from the real world, real happenings. Julian Assange, who recently got released from his ordeal. Charles Bronson, the infamous UK prisoner, another good one. There's a good movie about him as well called Bronson. In some sense, people like Ted Kaczynski, about who I released a video this morning. And who else? A guy called Damien Eccles as well comes to mind. So he was this kid in America who, I don't know all the details, this is the one I know least about, but he was this kid in America that got falsely accused of murder. If you look up on Google the Memphis 3, you'll see the full story. But anyway, this kid had some loose association with like Satanism or something that the police found, but because I think he was into like heavy metal or something. So it was just a case of like wrong place at the wrong time, and it just kind of looked bad, but turns out he's innocent. However, he gets sent to prison in 1994 on death row, and it's not until 2011 that this guy gets out. That kind of story. You know, he turned to spirituality. Again, this is the guy I know least about, but he wrote books about it later. He had some methods, basically, that he was just basically forced to develop to survive being an innocent man on death row as a kid. Amazing. Yeah, the Memphis 3, I think it's called. Look it up. The one I have like a sort of personal association with is is Julian Assange. Not in the sense that like I've met him or anything like that. I just liked his story. I followed him, and I actually used to live in London while he was incarcerated in the Ecuadorian embassy, and I would just wonder. I would always wonder, what is he doing in there? You know, how does he cope? There's like a little bit of that security footage of him like skating around in there, like that's been released, you know. But I would wonder, and one day it struck me because I was in London in my early 20s, doing this, that, and the other, you know. Yeah, just living life, you know. And I was there. I arrived in London some months before Julian entered the embassy, and I left London maybe like 6 or 7 years later to go back home. And this entire time, Julian Assange had been, you know, stuck in that tiny room. And it just kind of struck me. I was like, wow, that's amazing, you know. Like, here I am. I've had all these, you know, general life experiences in the past like 5, 6, 7 years. You know, just triumphs and humiliations and adventures and girlfriends and friends and you know, just a regular guy living it up, you know. And I've experienced that whole thing, whatever the hell it was. And meanwhile, Mr. Assange is just stuck in there. So I was like, you know, that takes grit. Whatever you think about him as a person, whatever you think about his cause and how he went about it, you know, I'm obviously sympathetic to his sort of overall cause, WikiLeaks and all that stuff. That's kind of why I was aware of this person to begin with. But now he's out. And the views of the ocean for this guy back in Australia, I think he's back in Australia. Oof. They must be something else. The views of the ocean, you know. And it just got me thinking, like, solitary confinement in general, whether you feel like you're confined indoors between the four walls like I did this morning or whatever, you know, it's all kind of relative, isn't it? It's all like how you look at it, you know. So whatever techniques these guys have, whatever their methods, whatever they do to cope with such constraints, such a limitation, I always pay attention, you know. I always think there's something to learn from these guys. I read what they say, what they write, just to get something from them. In terms of just like human psychology, you know. In extreme circumstances like that, you will get something, you know, distilled. These people are thrown back on their own mind, and they got nothing else. They really don't. And in Julian's case, it's like, it's a form of death row, you know. He's got enemies. He's got fucking CIA after him. He has no assurance that even if he does get out, that he's not going to get killed. You know, just the amount of pressure, immense. Bronson is another good one. That infamous prisoner. He's been in his cell just doing squats and push-ups and stuff, you know, for God knows how long. And yet he's found it in him to somehow become one of those, what they call like an outsider artist. Like apparently he paints, I believe, and he's even sold some of that stuff. He's written books, including a fitness book, which I skimmed through. And he goes like all in. You know, he's really figured out fitness. It's called solitary fitness. And supposedly he's like hench as fuck, big ass guy. You know? So one of the things, for instance, he says is how prisoners in general cope with that kind of thing, and him too, is a man needs a routine, you know. A man needs a routine to get through the day. So he's got a pretty predictable one, I take it, with his exercise and everything. And of course, this prison schedule kind of sets the pace of the dance. So that's like one small such lesson you might take from these stories. Men cope with prison through routine. Today the wind is picked up. I think I mentioned this. Yeah, we might hear some PSITHURISM. Ever so slight. It's better if it's a bit louder. Think about that sound as it sounds a bit like the ocean. And if you're literally next to the coast, where you can hear the actual sea, those two sounds, the sound of the sea and this sort of sound of the leaves, it sounds a bit like the ocean, doesn't it? So it's almost like you can't tell them apart, which is which, if you're by the coast. Amazing. This is why it's a privilege to if your bedroom happens to be and has some like tall windows, tall trees above it or something, and you get this sound. Oof, that's the stuff. That's the stuff, people. People. Anyway, isolation, confinement, it's all relative. I came to a village in the middle of nowhere, in the conventional understanding of that, what that means. Not a lot of people, isolated by a strip of sea, far from any population centers, And for some people out there, or a lot of people, most people even maybe, even a place such as this would be considered sort of an isolation, if not like a full-blown exile. A place like this, for some people, that might be said are on the lower sort of rungs of spiritual awareness or whatever. People that have an absolute like allergy to any silence or solitude. City dwellers, They might imagine a place like this and consider it to be like absolute torture just to sit here. It's constrictive, it's boring, it's like, in some people it'll be enough to cause panic, basically, because there's nothing going on, no stimulation of the conventional sort, anyway. Just a trail. To me, though, this is like heaven, and I have this thought, imagine like a surreal magical scenario, Charles Bronson or any of these guys, they all have some kind of cell, and all of their cells have some kind of door. Just imagine they've been in their cells for like 10, 20, 30 years, some life like death row people, they're never getting out, and one day their cell door magically opens to this right here. At first they can't believe it, At first even this dim November light might like burn their eyes. They might be like, oh, fuck. The breeze hits them. They almost get scared, they haven't been out. But yeah, the cell door opens, inviting them to step out. Now for these guys, like how amazing would all this be? This little 10-minute trail that I walk basically every day now, for a death row life, solitary confinement inmate, if they were suddenly released, in here, what would that feel like? This would be like absolute freedom. This would be like the whole world. This right here would be such a privilege, such a it would be just paradise, basically, So my point is, it's all relative, isn't it? It's all like a matter of perspective, pretty much. So yeah, I love these stories. I thought, I'm still experimenting with YouTube and stuff, and I initially thought that if I'm gonna do any YouTube at all regularly, I'll probably start by doing like book reviews, because I've read a lot, and a lot of these stories are about like solitary confinement stories, and I have a list of all these kind of books that I've yet to read, and I thought about reading those and like skimming them for many like psychological insights, like how do these men survive? What do they do? What do they find within? Because you got to burrow within. You don't have a choice. You got to burrow within. You got to find something, whatever it is. This Damien kid, the guy that was accused of murder. Among many things I remember, he said for him it was routine as well. And what he would do, he would religiously clean his cell. There's only so many things in a cell, like you're in like one of these American prisons, bed, toilet, four corners. Well, that's like eight corners, I guess. And he would go through all of them, get the dust out several times a day. And then he probably had some like meditation. Well, definitely, he had some kind of meditation practice and probably some kind of physical exercise practice. And that's what you do. So, yeah, maybe I'll read some of those books and relate those stories on this YouTube channel, guys. Frankly, I don't have any idea what I'm doing here. I recorded these initial videos just kind of spur of the moment because I was looking at Aaron Berry's videos, who left some comments this morning as well. Much appreciated. Very cool. Very cool. We're back at the sitting stove. This is where I sit. There was a clip about that was kind of going viral online some time ago. It was Tom Hardy, the actor who played Bronson in the movie about the movie about Bronson that they made, and so he relates this anecdote. And if you've seen this, you go ahead and skip this. If not, I'll relate the anecdote to you. He's like Tom Hardy, the actor. He calls obviously Bronson in prison. He's doing research for the role, and Bronson, just makes small talk with him on the phone. He's like, "How you doing, Tom? What's going on?" And Tom, as it happens, he had some like relationship problems with his girlfriend or something, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not doing too well, feeling down." And Tom says to Bronson that he doesn't know basically whether to he can't seem to live with women and live without him. And he's kind of confused, and he's just in a bad emotional state, and Bronson then tells him like, "Do you remember the floods? Do you remember the floods? Some kind of flood in England, I guess." And Hardy's like, "Yeah," and then Bronson's like, "Do you remember there was some kid and he got his leg stuck in the grate, and the water just kept rising and rising until eventually the kid drowned. They couldn't get him out." And Tom's like, "Yeah, yeah." And Bronson's like, "Yeah, that wouldn't have happened to me, because I would have told him, just cut it off. Cut my leg off." Cut it off. So Bronson basically said that sometimes in life, to survive, you have to cut off parts of yourself. Just a cool piece of knowledge, and I mean, Bronson was probably the way he is already before he got into prison. He was just the way he is, how he was already. But I took that to mean that surviving those kind of situations and spirituality and life in general, it does seem to me that it's some kind of process of elimination, isn't it? it's a process of not adding anything. It's often a process of just removing stuff from your life. You know what I mean? Remove distractions, remove bullshit, and there's no better like crucible for that than these very extreme situations where men get confined like this. You know, but it does seem to be a process of elimination. So in my own way, that's kind of what I've attempted to do by moving to a place like this. I'm trying to start the process of elimination and getting rid of all this nonsense, all this crud, all this dust, all this crap just clogging up my energy systems. You know what I mean? Garbage, all of it. And it's very muddled and muddy and weird, and I don't quite understand how it's gonna go, you know? All I can do is like start. I gotta begin somewhere, and bit by bit, hopefully, I'll get to some clarity. All right.